Happy Wednesday. Oh, it's Tuesday. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome to Dateline Hamden, a WNHH FM, New Haven and Hamden's home for community radio. We got a great episode going on today. We have two gentlemen in the room who, when everyone's done screaming and yelling and talking about politics, are actually day-to-day making the decisions in Hamden on how the town will run and how it will run in the future. So say good morning to Police Chief John Sullivan and acting town planner and not acting Economic Development Administrator Eric Johnson. Good morning, gentlemen, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for
I'm
having
going to
us.
ask you to talk right into the mic if you don't mind, Chief.
Morning, Paul. How are you?
Good.
Morning, Paul. Thanks for having us.
Great to have you. So we have a lot to talk to you about, specific things in the news in Hamden. We're going to round robin back and forth with you guys and then talk about how you got into doing what you're doing. Chief Sullivan, you and many people in Hamden were out last night at a community meeting. Hamden, like a lot of communities, including New Haven, have been wrestling with this wave of threats. Most of them just copycats, not actually based in reality, of people saying they're going to shoot up schools. So in Hamden, New Haven yesterday, they closed down a bunch of schools. Eli Whitney, Hamden, I think Hamden Middle, I'm not sure. And they went to Green. Well, that's over the line, I guess, in North Haven. And you guys are trying to figure out what to do. So what are we going to do and what's going on?
So it's been a great collaboration with the mayor's office, the Board of Ed, and the police department. Decisions were made Thursday night to close the school on Friday, and then Sunday night again to close the schools for Monday and Tuesday to give us time to put in a plan for some safety measures. And that's what was really talked about last night at the Board of Ed meeting.
And so what are you going to do? I hear you're going to do, what are they called, the metal detectors when you go in, right?
Yes, I believe the Board of Ed purchased metal detectors.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, while they're waiting for the metal detectors to be installed, they do have the handheld wanded metal detectors that they'll be using tomorrow for the first time.
And you know, one thing that always, when I look on the outside, how you guys do your job, one thing that always seems really tough to me is, so you know almost all the time when people send in threats like we read yesterday, all the horrible names they call people, said they're going to shoot up everybody, they're mad at bullies or whatever. You know that the majority of time, as it turned out in the New Haven cases, right, it's not real. Someone in one case was out of state, another case was a student just made up something. But every once in a while, it could be Michigan. So you take the measures so that you don't, God forbid, have anyone hurt. How do you do that ongoing when you have a wave like that?
Correct. When you get these threats, you have to treat them seriously. Whether they end up being credible or not, you have to take them seriously. I think our community, mainly our parents, our students, and our teachers, feel threatened, and it's a real feeling. It's a real perception by them. So we have to take that into account, and that's the reasons why we made decisions that we did, and that we're going forward with the measures to hopefully make everyone feel safer when we open the schools tomorrow.
As what I keep hearing from you, Chief Sullivan, is it's a we, it's not an I. The police department is one part of a team, including Board of Ed, school, city officials who work together. And Daniel Hunt says, Chief Sullivan and Mr. Johnson are two of my favorite people in Hamden. Thanks to Daniel for listening. Accommodating Dig says, all right, what's up? We're talking here with the police chief and the economic development chief. So specifically, you send officers to make people feel safe. You have school resource officers in the building. You also investigate crimes. So where are we on these threats in Hamden? Do we know who's doing them?
So currently, the Detective Bureau has ongoing investigations on each incident. They're all separate.
How many are we talking about?
There are several now.
How many schools?
We have the Hamden High School, the Hamden Middle School, and I believe there's a few other
Eli Whitney
schools involved. Eli Whitney is actually under the state police purview, but we are working with them as well. We have a very good relationship with the state police and great cooperation.
Don't you love all that jurisdiction stuff, Eric? 1 block away.
Yeah, well,
he has it too. Like on Cherry Ann Street, it's like half the block is New Haven, half Hamden. All right, so we digress. So you had a bunch of incidents. Carlin Meinson writes in, one of the New Haven threats was real. I wonder what she means. All threats need to be treated as real when children are involved. I'm thinking the chief's agreeing with that they're treating them as real. But I know we only heard yesterday about the ones that were not real, but I wonder what the real one was. That's kind of interesting. Sounds like
I think
Carlin
she's talking about there was an arrest made at one of the
Yeah,
New
but that
Haven
was
schools.
a made up. So a student called in and said there's someone with a gun coming in, and then she admitted she made it up. But Acres, we know stuff happens. Michigan just happened.
Yeah.
So you're investigating several incidents.
Correct.
And would they come email, phone, social media? Because I saw all three yesterday.
A lot of them are coming through Snapchats that the students and Instagrams that the students have. And also there is the see something, say something anonymous tip line that we have gotten them on.
Oh, really? Someone went anonymous and did turn out. Have any of these threats yet turned out to be true? I guess you did have a case where someone brought a gun to school and you did arrest that person.
Yeah, that was an incident prior to this, but we have had some incidents at the high school over the past couple weeks.
Are we at a moment now in Hamden, in New Haven, in America, where we're riding a wave of copycat, not true threats that we have to respond to as real? Are we in a kind of tough moment for public education and public safety?
Well, I think like Carlin said, we have to take them all serious. We have to take them all as real, and then we go from there. If they pan out and end up not being real, that's best case scenario. But we do have to treat them, every single one, seriously, and that they're legitimate at the time.
Valerie Horsley, thank you, Chief Sullivan, for taking these threats seriously. Do you have kids?
I do not.
Okay. I'm just wondering, because a lot of what I heard last night from people was everyone who had kids and what it meant for them, what was said at the table. I was talking to one dad whose kid was texting another kid while the cross lockdown was happening. I mean, it's pretty intense stuff, you know, and it's so red hot while it happens. When it turns out not to be true, we all kind of relieve, have a sigh, and move on. But it sounds like in Hamden last night was a pretty big meeting where they feel like these have been ongoing, deeper issues about school safety.
Yeah, I think the parents take it very serious. I think they have legitimate concerns, and they were addressed last night.
SROs is a big question. That's police officers stationed in a school. How many does Hamden have, and where are we going with that?
Currently, we have one assigned to the Hamden High School. We are short, just like most departments are right now. We're in the hiring process, and as we build back up to staffing levels that are higher, it's a conversation that I would have to put more SROs into the schools.
And that's another national debate about trouble filling the ranks in police forces. We're seeing that everywhere. Eileen Milani Aiello, thank you for listening in and commenting. How effective do you think security officers and metal detectors are?
Well, they've been used in New Haven, I believe. I think they're as good as the people that are using the equipment. And, hopefully we're going to have our security staff be trained in them from the high school. And, again, the main thing is that we want our teachers, our students, and our parents to feel at ease and feel safe that their children are in the school and the teachers are safe as well. So this is just one measure that we're hoping is effective.
I was remembering metal detectors at Wilbur Cross, and my daughters were there in the aughts. My daughters were white, and one day she used to bake cakes to bring into school for the kids and the teachers. One day she brought a big knife to cut the cake. I was so mad at her. They let her in because they never used to wand the white kids. Like, I felt she should have maybe been suspended. I thought, it's like there was a racial thing going across. Now, it was a little different from your schools because your schools are so, in fact, racially balanced in Hamden, which I think is the big untold story. Cross was like 90% people of color, and the white kids just went right through the detectives because I was thinking that when you said it's how people use them. So anyway, it's a good point. We're talking to Chief John Sullivan and Eric Johnson, who's in charge of development in Hamden, and they both got to their positions in the last year. And we'll get to more of those comments. Thank you for all the hard work, Linda Gist. Daniel Hunt had a vacancy question. I'll get back to that. And Eileen. Eric, when we talk about day-to-day problems in towns like Hamden, we talk about, taxes go up, someone gets the bill, the reassessment, you have violence, how are we going to deal with it? But underlying it is how do we get prosperity in a stronger town, correct? And how do we build up the tax base? And everybody says the same thing when they're in politics. We want to encourage more business. We want to keep taxes down, keep efficient government. But what it's really hard to do is what you're supposed to do, which is actually find ways to have people open new businesses in town, build new projects, and build up the tax base. Is that an accurate way of putting it?
I think that's fair. I do want to make one just more comment to what the chief said. I think it's not just about what parents feel. I think it's also about what kids feel. I have teenagers, one in college and one who's a junior in high school. And I think with the advent of social media, when that stuff happens, I think the kids are talking about it. And I think we have to be very careful of this balance between creating a culture of fear in schools and creating environments where kids can thrive and feel safe. And just that's part of the discussion. I think is why you hear so much blowback from other places, because in trying to make people feel safe, sometimes you make them not feel safe. And I think we just have to think about how to do that in where kids are and how.
Well, that's a
kids
great
think.
question, because one thing the police get a lot is, hey, send an officer down to school so they feel safe. That's what they're doing in New Haven, and I understand why they're doing that. Are you saying sometimes that makes them think there's more to worry about?
I think that there are a lot of real and perceived cultural issues that come with police intervention.
That was that whole debate about
it's police intervention. It's what does that mean psychologically when you're sending people into a place where they feel like it's secure, and there are lots of different levels to it. But I think as much as people are talking about how parents are reacting, I think it's also important to hear how the students are reacting. Particularly, it's not like when we were kids, when something happened and you found out about it at the 6 o'clock news. When something happens at one of these schools, they're on Facebook, they're on Snapchat, they're on Instagram. Like, everybody knows, and sometimes they have more real-time information about what they're feeling, about what's going on. And then increasingly, when the issues are for them not to come back or not to deal with it, what you then have, and there are much better people at this, is a lot of undiagnosed trauma in kids that definitely impact performance. And we're coming off at a time where for the last year and a half, kids have just not had normal lives. So now we're having more trauma that's not diagnosed, and people in places where you can't deal with it. And I think some of that displaced whatever is one of the reasons why we're having incidents like this. But I just the point was that there's a bunch of stuff going on with kids that we should also make sure is at the forefront of
And
that.
a big issue of that, maybe it's too easy, everyone says social emotional. So this wouldn't be your two departments, but where the schools get counselors into people. I think talking about listening to kids, which is hard. But the kids are cool. They're a lot cooler than we were kids.
Right.
Every time we interview the Hampton High kids, they're cool.
Well,
All of them.
They know more than we do.
They've grown up faster.
They've grown up faster. They've grown up in an age with technology where they have infinitely more information than we do. And unfortunately, just because they know more does not mean that they're more mature. They just know more and have access to way more information.
They're growing up fast. I always thought the best thing as a parent was help them not have to grow up so fast.
Yeah.
Linda says, how about when school's letting out, how sure the kids be safe? And Carlin says, we have to ask the question, why are kids so angry? How can we help them use their nonviolent methods to solve problems that cannot all fall on the teachers or the schools? So meanwhile, Eric...
But that wasn't your question.
That's okay. I'm very much glad that you added that. No, that's great. You're a parent. You're someone that thinks about this stuff. And then how do we pivot to the neighborhood improvement program? You got $600,000 approved.
Yep.
And you're going to go try to help people demolish. You're going to try to demolish blighted properties like we did in New Haven through the Livable Cities Initiative that you used to run. Help business and homeowners make improvements. I'm guessing that's like the facade program. Here's a loan.
So what we try to do is kind of have four foundational elements, and then there's a fifth one that with time we'll get to. The first two are already there. We just don't talk about them very much. So in Hamden, there's already an existing tax abatement program for individuals who want to make improvements to their properties.
And that's a phase-in.
It's kind of a phase-in. It's slightly different than what happens in New Haven, whereas ours is a little more formulaic. So if you, and it's on our website, based upon the amount of the investment that you want to make, we can tell you almost to the dollar what you should be able to expect in terms of forgiveness. We have a program that's currently on the books about giving waivers for certain building permit fees. We don't do plumbing, HVAC, and electrical, but some of your base building permit fees you can get waivers for. So those are things that are on the books that we just have to talk about more and better.
So some people say that helps you build the tax base, because if someone's making an improvement, if they hadn't made the improvement, you wouldn't get those fees anyway. If you're phasing in taxes, you wouldn't have gotten that tax revenue anyway. The other side of the argument is sometimes they would build it anyway, and you're losing out on revenue and the benefits. Like in New Haven, we have projects that aren't going to pay taxes for 5, 10, 15 years, so why do we build them?
Well, it's not that they're not paying taxes, right? They're not taking on the full burden of the increment. So it goes into hey, I have a building.
It phases in for 5 years.
Right. So you have a building that makes, this worth $1 million, and let's say they pay, $50,000 in taxes. This is not a real example. They pay $5,000 in taxes. Just make it better, right? So the day after you get your C of O, your taxes go from your certificate of occupancy. Your taxes will go from $5,000 to like $12,000. So people are like, wait a minute, I haven't occupied this building yet. I haven't got my revenues from this building yet. Why did my tax bill go up? Why did my tax bill double? So what it really is, it's not that the town is losing any money. What the town is, it's slowly increasing the amount of revenue to make sure that the business has the opportunity to be successful. right? Because there's a transition period that's associated with all these new growth opportunities, and builders and developers and and owners have a series of set costs, and you're just trying to like, well, let my revenues come up, let my revenues meet my new cost obligations, and we'll get there. And that's why smart tax policy makes sense. We're not trying to give anything away. We're just really trying to
So you're talking that
moderate.
exists, the new thing you're doing.
Right.
Well, first, you're letting people know that.
We're letting
I've
people
been
know.
with you when someone's come up to you and said, "Hey, I want to do a business in in Hamden. How's that going to work?" And he said, "Let me talk to you about how that works."
Right.
So now you got some new things to offer them.
So the two things we do is one used to happen in town, which was a facade improvement program, which is you want to make improvements to your exterior part of your building. We'll kind of give you kind of a forgivable loan grant in order to do so.
And why does government always do this for forgivable loans rather than outright grant? Because we want to make sure you follow the terms and
Yeah.
you're on the hook for the money if you don't follow them.
That's right. It's a compliance feature. You're trying to get compliance. The second thing what we're trying to do is a little different, which is kind of an activation program. So kind of the same kind of logic where you can use it for one of three ways. One is, you want to buy down some of your lease expenses going in, right? You're starting a business, you're moving to a new place, you're trying to figure all these stuff out. Hey, if I can get a break on my lease, it gives me, again, the opportunity to ramp up.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing is, hey, I want to make improvements to my building, to my business. Hey, whether you're a bakery or a recording studio or a pet shop, right? There are things that you want to do when you start your business. And what ends up happening is if the landlord does it, right, your $5 rent per, $5 per square rent, gets amortized into the cost of the lease, so it goes to $10. Well, you didn't necessarily budget a $10 lease. So all the things that you're trying to do to get you started and get you fresh, we're trying to help activate.
So you
those
want to
things.
get people started. Are you hearing from people besides the day you and I ran into an unmentioned person who are trying to go to New Hamden, start a business, and it's not happening?
No, there are a lot of people, and actually I'm not surprised, but a lot of people want to go to Hamden to start their business and to grow. I mean, it's a diverse community. It's got very visible access. A stable residential base, and people with middle and moderate income. So
are they fine? Is it easy to do, or they need Eric to dangle this stuff before him or work out some
well,
problems?
it's a combination of both. I mean, I think we're also because of COVID, in one of the most disruptive shifts in our economy. So people are just still trying to figure stuff out, right? So it's why is this going to work? How is this going to work? And I need help because the faith, particularly in some of the retail and commercial spaces, which are the engine to how do I feel community and feel place, are all being disrupted by COVID and really by technology.
All right. And we're talking about that with Eric Johnson, the Economic Development Director and Acting Town Planner in Hamden, and John Sullivan, the Hamden Police Chief. Both have been around a long time, but both have sort of new-ish challenges.
I don't know. We both look younger than you, Paul.
You're both a lot younger than I am. In fact, I don't want to say it, but you're younger than our kids. But anyway, John Sullivan, how long have you been a police officer?
Since 1995.
And you started your career on the Hamden Force.
Yes.
And you grew up in Hamden.
Grew up in Hamden, attended Hamden High School.
So you went to Hamden High.
Yep, graduated in 89.
How do you remember Hamden High back in the day compared to now?
A lot of the same challenges that we see today. Just maybe not at the level that we're seeing.
You're sort of in between two phases because there was a riot in Hamden in the 60s.
Yeah, we had some issues back then as well. I think when I was there, the Guardian Angels came to the school.
I remember that.
Yeah, so I mean, that's how old I am.
Did you grow up wanting to be a cop?
So yeah, I attended the University of Connecticut.
Mm-hmm. And did you go there saying I'm going to learn their criminal justice to be a cop?
Yeah,
or you weren't sure?
I was a political science, criminology major.
And why political science?
I like politics. I've always been interested in politics, but I went with the long criminology aspect of the political science program at the University of Connecticut. I wanted to be a police officer.
And why did you? When did it start? I've talked to officers, they tell me a million things. I watched Hawaii Five-0 at 12. Someone's actually told me that. Other one is like, my cousin got shot to death, and I saw how the detectives did such a good job. I wanted to do that too. What was John Sullivan's moment?
I think it's kind of a corny. I like to help people. I really do. It's.
I hear that a lot too.
You get so much joy out of helping people. Right now, we're in the midst of a toy drive that we participate in with the rest of the town departments. We were out there last Saturday. We'll be out there this Saturday and on the 18th. And we get more out of it than the kids. I think we really enjoy. We have a lot of fun when we're out there. It's just you know that you're going to make someone's life and Christmas better by doing what we're doing.
Kim Washington said, "There goes my chief, John Sullivan, 3 hearts." Thanks for listening, Kim Washington. I know you do a lot of great work with survivors and dealing with street violence. And in fact, a police officer, when they say you want to go to help people, yeah, you like the events and it feels good to do a toy drive. You're also helping people in what your day-to-day job is, right? Like solving a crime or responding to a crime or protecting a victim is also, or stopping people, helping someone who's committing crimes and getting them off that track and getting them help. That's helping people too. I mean, isn't that more fundamental to what it means to be a helping person through the profession?
Every day you affect someone's life, and you try to affect it in a positive way. Even if sometimes you're dealing with tough situations or bad situations, you try and make it the best you can. Be empathetic to people.
Well, tell me stories about that. Like what kind of assignments did you have over the years? Did you work detective division? Did you work patrol? Did you work special victims, Bureau of Identification?
It could take a while, but I started in the patrol division. Then I was transferred young into the community police division, which was kind of new back then for our department. I became, which is called the SRO program now. We really didn't call it that, but I was in the high school.
You worked in the school?
I worked in the school,
So you went back to the school where you were a student and you were a school resource officer.
Yep.
When was that and what was that like?
That was probably around 99, 2000. It was great. Some of the teachers that taught me were still there. Mrs. Henderson, one of my favorite teachers.
So it was your chance to arrest them if they give you a C.
I would have had to do a lot of arresting.
You made it. You did okay. So, but in truth, like, tell me about a day as SRO when you saw what the job entailed.
So it really wasn't established until I got there. It was kind of going to school, and we built relationships. We taught in the classes. You tried to be a mentor to the students. You wanted to be someone that the children in the school felt safe talking to, and that was my main role, and that's really what the role of SRO is, and mainly their safety, the safety of the students. That's another. So
can you
role.
tell me a story? Something happened one day when you're an SRO that kind of drove home to you what the job is, or kind of taught you how to do the job, or help you think about how to develop that position?
It was funny. We were involved in a program where a gentleman was going to come back to the town. He was successful, and I'm forgetting his name, but he had talked about wanted to give back to Hamden, and he had mentioned that how he had gotten into an argument in the school, and the SRO at the time straightened it out, talked to him, and took the time to really care about him and explain to him that getting into fights isn't the way to go, and talk things out. And we worked everything out with all the parties involved. And he was just he would come to me every so often, and for advice, and he brought that up when we were talking. When he was coming back to the town to do some things for the town that he wanted to get back to, and he had brought up that the SRO, and it was me. So, that's where, you have those instances.
Well, what people are concerned about when this argument goes about SRO is whether having a police officer have to be there with arrest powers ramps it up and makes it criminalized. I think what I'm hearing from you is the more important role is to stop a problem before it starts and have trust.
Absolutely. You want to build trust, not only with the kids in our school system, but with our whole community.
And Jesse Phillips is suggesting, thank you for listening, Jesse Phillips, if Hamden embraces and puts SROs in all the schools, they should be in plain clothes to blend in. That's such an interesting question, because other people would say the uniform is part of the message.
I do know that there are programs that do have dressed down SROs where they have like a polo and khakis. So that that is an idea. That's something that we'd be willing to talk about and look into.
Well, let's talk about. There's arguments on both sides, right? Part of the idea of having being a cop, if you're going to do SRO rather than just a social worker, is that someone seen as a position of authority who also has the power to take other measures, and then or has more training for dealing with these situations. And then the other side, when people raise concerns, I think like Eric before, was like a message to the uniform sends a message to children that maybe it's not safe here because you need law enforcement there. I think our SOO that's in the school right now does have that good relationship with the kids. They do feel comfortable with him. He does have specialized training in de-escalation. Oh no, that's the reason.
Incident.
That is the reason. I'm just talking about it in the uniform question. I don't know what I think about it. I think it's a really interesting question.
It is, and like I said, there's programs that do have the dress down, and there are ones that have the full uniform.
Right now, we're doing full uniform with our one SRO.
Correct.
Right? Do you think this is actually a question that'll be discussed, or what do you think?
It's something we're willing to talk about.
And do you have any thoughts about it? I mean, do you have any leanings? Because I have to be honest, I don't.
Yeah, right now, he's in uniform, so that's where we've gone. But like I said, not something that we're not willing to talk about, and hear the other side of the benefits to it.
And then Carlin Meisen says we need both SROs and mental health supports, especially now. And Kim says Officer Jeremy Brewer is excellent at Hampden High School. So what did you do after, just quickly, what other divisions did you work in?
Oh, I was in the street interdiction team. I was transferred to both the statewide narcotics task force and FBI task force. Then I was promoted to detective, where I worked in major crimes, and then in the youth division for a while. Then I was promoted to sergeant, at which time I spent the bulk of my career as the night supervisor on 4 to 12
on patrol.
Is that
B squad?
It's called our third detail.
Okay.
And then I was transferred to our ethics and integrity unit, where I spent about 5 years.
Is that internal affairs?
That's internal affairs.
So basically, that's an argument for having someone come up through the ranks to be the chief, because you know how each department operates.
It probably was the one best assignment for me to prepare myself to become a police chief.
Because it does make some of the rank and file hate you if you have the discipline.
Well, you're dealing with personnel issues, and that's, as a chief, you deal with a lot of personnel issues, almost on a daily basis. You do have budgets that you have to deal with, but on a day-to-day, one of the most important aspects of your job is personnel.
Tell me about something you learned in there. A story doesn't have to be names of someone who did something wrong, but tell me about a day there when you said, okay, that's what this involves if I'm going to be in upper management and dealing with personnel.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I got out of it is, it's not a sought after job in a police department.
No,
but
how to be the least popular.
Yeah, I mean, you have to investigate sometimes police officers.
And did you ever have to recommend that someone get disciplined?
Yeah, it that comes along with it.
Was it ever someone you hung out with?
Yeah, there a lot of these officers that you work with, you become friends with. You're with each other a lot.
It's like reported, by the way, a little bit when you write a story about someone who's a really nice person, like Eric Johnson. He doesn't like you, right? Although he never got in trouble. But what happened with that? Did you lose friendships?
No, I think if you do your job right, and everyone takes responsibility for what they did, and you treat them fairly, but we have to hold ourselves responsible, and you have to make that distinction between doing your job as a professional and friendship. And that was the biggest thing.
Hard one.
It's not easy, but you have to do it.
I gotta be honest. I don't think reporters, we don't really get to have friends. No, I mean, I'm kind of serious about that. Jesse Phillips, trust is the authority, like the chief said. So, and then as chief, some of the programs you've been involved in the last year has included a new community policing effort modeled on one in Camden, New Jersey, and broken windows theory, which is interpreted two very opposite ways in America, and an involvement with people with emotional disabilities or developmental disabilities. You had some kind of public dance with the officers doing the cha-cha. Tell me about that.
We've been involved through our youth center. Chris Bouchel, who just retired, we've done special needs dances. We do them on a regular basis. We've had training.
I hadn't heard about that before. Police special need dances. What is that?
Well, it's through our youth center that's under the police department. It's our community of special needs who, they come out. They're a very tight-knit group, and we've had dances. We have King and Queen at the end of the dance. We have a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite things to be involved in.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. John Sullivan is the police chief, Eric Johnson, development chief in Hampden. You're listening to Dateline Hampden on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home and Hampden's home for community radio, 103.5 FM live streamed, newhavenandpenn.org. Eric Johnson, you also grew up around here. You grew up in the New Harville neighborhood, right?
Right at Shelton Division.
Shelton Division, so pretty near Hampden, too.
Pretty near, yeah.
And when did you decide, hey, so John Sullivan knew he wanted to be a cop. He saw that as a way of helping people. When did you decide, I want to build stuff and make deals about where you can start a business?
So it goes back to my childhood, actually. So I grew up Shelton Division, in the shadows of the Winchester firearms factory. So
now most of the jobs are already gone when you're growing up, right? It used to be 15,000 people, went down to 1,000.
So I remember, and I'm sure some of your listeners, and definitely you remember when that whole campus was closed. This is before Yale bought it, before Science Park was there. There was barbed wire that wouldn't let you in. But then every day, they still had the whistle to indicate shift change.
Why was the whistle still going? Was it automated?
I guess it was automated, and people forgot to turn it off.
Did you get woken up at midnight and 8 a.m.?
So the lunch shift and the evening shift, it would still go on. So
Wow.
I got into kind of planning and development because I didn't understand why that place was vacant. I didn't understand there was barbed wire. I didn't understand why the whistle kept going off. And I made the decision that I wanted to be in a place or in a position where I got to make the decisions as to where and how things happened.
That's so interesting.
So
I
that's
remember
kind of how I got there, really from the experience of looking at a vacant science park when I was a kid.
That's so interesting. And, I followed all those debates on how to rebuild Science Park. And one of the issues from the New Hallville alder, Chuck Allen, who's dead now, I remember he pushed to reopen that street that was closed off because it was a main thoroughfare connecting New Hallville and Dixwell and the rest of the city. And that was a planning decision they fought for, and they changed. And I would argue might have helped economic development, correct?
It was. I mean, like literally, there were like police guards and barbed wire that wouldn't let you go down that part of Winchester
And how did
Avenue.
that make you feel in your major thoroughfare in the neighborhood you're growing up in?
Well, you feel like you're in a military zone, right? This is supposed to be like this very proud neighborhood, and then part of it you can't do because you have like barbed wire and police presence in front of this massive building that you just remember used to make guns. It's kind of a surreal experience,
It
and then
is.
you just keep hearing this bell like the ghost of workers are going.
And it's like so many things. It's almost like, I don't want to make too many analogies of the Berlin Wall, but when that opened up, everyone found out it's okay.
Right.
It was okay. Now you can go eat there, you can go work there. It was all right.
Well, it at the time, it like coming up again through the through the 80s and early 90s, right? That
was
just
a rough time.
That just reinforced what people already thought about the Ville.
So then you decided you were going to go into. Did you know as a kid you were thinking about economic development when you talking about making the decisions?
No, I was young and naive. I thought I was going to go do something that was going to make me rich. I used to watch Family Ties as a kid, and I wanted to be like Michael. I want to be like the black Michael P. Keaton. I thought I was going to go be an investment banker someplace and make a bunch of money. And actually, when I went to Trinity undergrad, and I actually had the opportunity to do an internship with Jim Farnham, who's still in town. And we actually had.
He was the director of Downtown Harbor Development for City of New Haven.
Yeah.
And now he's a consultant on a lot of government stuff.
Yeah, so I actually had opportunity to do some projects with Jim Farnham and really opened my eyes about like, okay, this is planning and this is how you could actually make some change.
And was
happen.
that when he was in the city or after he'd left?
No, this is after he left and had the consulting
Consultancy
firm
with Harry Wexler.
Yeah, Holt Wexler Farnham. And then,
So you learned with an internship about how planning could make those decisions.
and then made the decision to go to graduate school for planning after
In
I left
Baltimore,
Trinity.
D.C.
Yep.
And where was that?
I went to Morgan State University in Baltimore, and then started my career really in community organizing. Morgan was a night program, and I started my career as a drug organizer around open air drug markets in West Baltimore. So,
Wow.
So this is again, 94.
He's had an interesting life.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So this is 94. I mean, this is like The Wire, right? So
No, I'm thinking
One of my
more like
favorite
the book
shows.
that James Foreman Jr. just wrote a couple of years ago at Yale Law School, and he was in D.C. at the time, too. And he said it was black progressive voices who said we need to shut down the drug market, high penalties, mandatory minimum sentences, and they were saying that's what we need for our community. Then a generation later, those same voices were saying the drug wars failed our community because everyone got swept up and criminalized. And we didn't deal with the underlying problems. You were there then at the moment of creation. That was the beginning of the federal drug bill with the Clinton administration.
yeah, I think it retrospectively it's probably more complex, but I do say, when I was in Baltimore, and Baltimore wasn't New Haven, and New Haven had some special things happen. But when you were in Baltimore, and parts of DC, there are literally 30 people on the corner. Everybody looking at you, everybody trying to figure out. It was definitely a different dynamic, and I think that unfortunately for places like New Haven and Hamden and other parts of Connecticut, I think some of our training is based upon what happens in communities like Baltimore and Detroit and Chicago. So we take lessons, although the scale of the problem there is not the same scale here.
Right,
So
when we
that-
talk about crime in Hamden, I've talked about this with Chief Sullivan, and probably our fault in the media. It's like everyone thinks they're getting their purse snatched and they're getting shot. If it happened once in 30 years.
So I think I think sometimes we don't have the right perspective because the lessons that we learn about how we should deal with problems are usually coming from places that are not as similar to where you are as you think they are.
Well, one of those lessons was from that time, we started policing here, when you were in community policing in Hamden, and now you're reviving it based on Camden. It's called the broken windows theory, right? So do you let that drug market exist? Do you let that broken window stay broken? Do you let a small problem, the squeegee guy stopping the person off the highway, do you let it become a bigger problem and send a symbol that lawlessness is okay? But then it got interpreted two different ways, right? In New York City under Giuliani, they arrested the squeegee guy. They arrested people for small offenses or the drug dealers on the corner, right? Which is a crime, right? But then other people said we tried a different approach in New Haven, tried to do fewer arrests and look at what the problem was and team up with other people to solve the underlying causes, right? So then we've had this whole debate about what it even means to do broken windows policing that doesn't allow the outward manifestations of unallowed behavior to fester and become bigger. Isn't that kind of what you were talking about?
I think so, but I think it's also kind of the way that we deal with or don't deal with poverty, right? I mean, because again, it's again more complex. A lot of the situations that unfortunately, there's a big corollary between high crime areas and poverty, right? And how we treat poverty is different.
And then a lot of people in poor neighborhoods with a lot of crimes say most of us don't commit crimes, so it's not because we're poor we're committing the crime. But then other people say, like, you're trying to fix the problem in economic development is that there's more opportunities, people might not need to commit the crime.
Well, I think that we as America, we treat poverty differently depending upon who's poor and who's not, right? Which is again different show, different issue. But I think you have to.
Relevant, yeah.
But I think you have to acknowledge that we treat different depending upon where you are and what you look like. We treat poverty differently. Mm-hmm. I also think that because there are other systemic issues in poor communities of color, right, that then happen to have drugs and some other things, right, then we get this policing effect, right, and we have to manage it because ultimately people want to feel safe, right, and so what happened?
There's no easy answer.
Right, so there's no easy answer. So what happened in Baltimore, what happened in New Haven, what happened in D.C. really was a call for, like, I don't feel safe, and I have to go to the people who are supposed to make me feel safe, right? It's just that there's never been kind of a full trust in that process.
So, Chief Sullivan, trying to build trust, how about that fundamental question? When you got someone who's committing antisocial behavior, drug dealing, I'm not talking about shooting someone dead, drug dealing, vandalism, people in the neighborhoods hardest hit, as often is poor, parts of Southern Hampton, they're saying, why aren't you just arresting these people? Like, why are you allowing them to do it? Then other people say, why are you arresting everybody? That just makes the problem worse. Do you arrest the squeegee guy, or do you, get the Yale Child Study in to deal with the kid? What do you think about that? How's your thinking evolved in that over the years?
So the main aspect of the Camden model that we do is engagement. We want to engage with our community. We have our officers getting out of the cars. They're going into businesses. They're establishing relationships with not only the business owners, but the people who live in the community. We try not to make arrests when we don't have to. We deal with, I guess what you call panhandlers, our homeless community. We don't look to arrest them. We're actually working with mental health organizations and other organizations to get them the help that they need. So sometimes it's counterproductive to make an arrest. We think the way we're doing it is the proper way and a more productive way of helping our community.
Thoughts on that, Eric?
No, I think that's right. I just think it's complicated. It's kind of having it's usually the unspoken rules and norms that govern a neighborhood, and I think that we've had just systemic breakdown in what those norms have been for a lot of different reasons. And when you get back to having kind of those norms, neighborhoods function better. But we've just been in very disruptive cycles, and I think we're in another cycle that and this is again not the opinion of Eric Johnson, not of Hampden or of the chief, that we're seeing a massive kind of reaction to COVID, and then also what's happening with the decriminalization of marijuana and drug sales in the community. Right?
I got to admit, it's my whole life I thought it should be legal. I am a little concerned about people being stoned all the time.
Well, but it's not that. I mean, think about we're living where there's been an underground economy that's existed around kind of the sale of narcotics, right? Whether we want to say it or not, that has been disrupted, right? So, and it's not. We see the person who's the dealer on the corner or whoever. But that person is paying for somebody's childcare. That person is paying for somebody's stores. That there's a kind of a in the community dollar effect that happens, and all of that is systematically being taken away outside of the neighborhood where somebody else is making that money and it doesn't resolve.
And with all those big questions, I always find that it's all left at the hands of the cops, most of whom have not studied political science in college. I kind of feel like you guys get left to deal with a lot of stuff you don't always have all the training for.
I remember correctly, there was a bad incident that happened years ago in Dallas where a few Dallas officers were shot. And the chief at the time said something very prophetic. He said, sometimes they're giving police too much to do. And, you know, I just remember when he said that, you know, it really, you know.
That's why I didn't understand why there was such animosity during Black Lives Matter, because the two groups that were against each other totally agreed on the point. They totally agreed that cops shouldn't be the social workers.
Right, but I'm saying, but I think part of the piece that gets lost in the discussion, and probably how it was framed for people, it was this idea of how resources are allocated within police departments. And if you know that people are doing too much or have these other roles, it's how are we diversifying our resources to deal with the more comprehensive issues that are being asked to address. At the end of the day, it was kind of a resource allocation discussion that people wanted to have, but it was framed wrong because of how they chose to define it.
Yeah. Do you agree with that? Or?
Yeah.
All right. That gets a great segue to a completely unrelated question I wanted to ask you before we run out, because the time's going out. You're listening to Dateline Hamden. We got Chief Sullivan and Economic Director Johnson on here, and that's money and resources. We are living, gentlemen, in I think a 5-minute period that is unlike any we've lived before and we live again, in which money is being showered on communities like Hamden and New Haven.
Hopefully.
Especially, well, hundreds of millions of dollars are coming to New Haven City and schools, the federal, the first pandemic relief, and now the infrastructure bill. And I guess Hamden's got a lot of money too, right? I mean,
hopefully.
All right, so I want to ask you specifically, now that you're going to have 5 minutes when you actually get money, what do you want to do with it? Like, what opportunities are for police department in any of the major 3 pieces of federal legislation that passed in the last year?
So we have a budget that we work within. We're not getting, I don't think, a lot of money from that. But, you know, over the last 2 years, we have been able to get monies for equipment that was much needed.
What kind of equipment?
Cars that we haven't had in a while. An IT infrastructure that was aging. So, you know, monies have come in that way. We have applied for some grants for crime prevention that we've used.
And what would they be? Like what kind of programs?
So, like this time of year, what we call Holiday Patrol, where we have our extra officers in our shopping marts areas. That is paid for through that grant.
Mm-hmm. Eric, infrastructure, right? That's the word of the hour.
It is.
As you and I have talked before, Northern Hamden, right? It's prime for a lot of economic development, that kind of university, town, city, retail, but you don't have sewers.
So I'll answer to kind of in 3 ways. So one, I would say I would agree with the chief. Like towns like Hamden and other communities, one, we need to invest in our internal infrastructure. So use these resources to make sure that we have the IT systems and administrative support so that we can be efficient. One of the reasons why there's so much disconnect between residents and governments is because we've not invested in our infrastructure so that we can communicate back efficiently. I think that's a lot of the big thing. The second thing I would say is we do have some big infrastructure projects in Hamden, whether that's new sewer systems or personally like redoing Dixwell Avenue. But the third thing I'll say really quickly is, given the amount of money that's being thrown, like $1.7 trillion is an astronomical amount of money.
Is that going to pass?
The infrastructure bill was 1.7.
Infrastructure did pass.
Infrastructure did pass. Build Back Better, we'll see. But even regardless of that, I think the important thing we have to figure out is scale, right? Because, you know, if let's say it's $1 trillion, you know, the idea that, you know, Hamden at 60,000 people and New Haven at 125,000 people are going to be able to compete and win dollars where communities of 250,000 people, 1 million people.
But the state gets the money and divides it up. I mean, New Haven got over $200 million from the American Rescue Plan.
But I still think that if we're going to have meaningful, sustainable change, we're going to have to think about it at scale that makes sense. Because
meaning regionally?
Well, you know, regionally is a bad word, but I'm saying kind of, you know, we're going to have to have.
Is that a bad word?
It's not a bad word to me.
Bad word?
It's not a bad word to me, but I'm just saying that we're going to have to think about how we do things at scale, which means that when we talk about doing Dixwell Avenue, it's just not the Hamden side of Dixwell Avenue; it's the Hamden and the New Haven side.
What am I doing? Traffic improvements.
Yes, traffic improvement, utilities. You know, safe streets. All that stuff has to be at scale. So there's an opportunity where you can actually feel change. You know, so much of the stuff that we do is.
How about fiber optic? Is that on your radar?
It is. It is.
How is it on your radar?
Well, I mean, you have to plan for it, and then, you know, it's more than just getting kids laptops so that they
No,
can
putting in fiber optic
we
networks.
have to put in fiber optic, and actually we have to think about how we're going to do 5G.
Well, Groton and some others have put in their own municipally owned fiber optic networks, and there's been a proposal by some to piggyback on what Wallingford did with municipally owned utility companies that add fiber optic. Any thoughts of that if we're going to think big and sustainable?
I think those are the things that you have to put on the table.
What about the sewers? That's big in Northern Hampden, right?
Well, it's big.
Hard to build and put in business,
Well, but it's time to do it, because what you can't develop certain things if you don't have sewers.
So is that going to come from money? Is it going to flush downhill from the?
Ideally, the town has already started to talk about it. We'll make applications to SCROG and to the state, and it's a plan that you hope we can do in the next 5 to 10 years. Unfortunately, when it comes to big economic development projects that you think will move the needle, particularly from a tax standpoint, it's not a 1 to 3 year thing. It's really a 5 to 10 year thing until you can get meaningful change and reduction in tax.
All right. Kim Washington's Amen. Amen. Sorry, I did the Jewish way. Eric Johnson, totally agree with you. Gentlemen, the time ran out. It was so great talking to you. I felt I could have gone another hour. And I actually think there might even be more in common with your jobs than it sounds like on the job descriptions. But
hey, Paul, thanks a lot for the time. We appreciate it.
And thank you,
Paul.
Sullivan.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks for all the questions. They were great. I'm sorry we didn't get to all that. You want to quickly talk about the PAL program? Is it being implemented?
Well, right now we haven't fully implemented it. We are working with some programs, the Pop Warner football program right now. Our officers, they had a very successful season, the football program. Our officers were mentors. They helped coach. So we are doing PAL-like programs. We don't have the PAL program in place as of yet.
All right, but it's coming.
We're trying to.
All right. So thanks to the Hampden Police Chief John Sullivan and Eric Johnson, Economic Development Director and Acton Town Planner, and the man who early on saw a hill to downtown district coming in a place in New Haven near the train station where for decades stuff left unbuilt, just vacant lots. And it's happened today, so maybe the same thing will happen in Hampden.
Bigger and better.
Sewers in Northern Hampden. All right. And we're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It'd Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long on WNHH, New Haven and Hampden's home for community radio.
Hello, my name is Harry Jones from WNHH LP 103.5 FM. The following is a
My name's
message
Johnny